Oh, hey. Questions about marketing and crowdfunding. That's what we're covering today. Hello, everyone. My name is Tessa, and I'm with the IdeaPros marketing team. I actually have Simon Solotko here with me as well. Hello, Simon. We're going to test his audio because we are
We are live.
Yep, we're live. Oh, look, you're great. Okay, excellent. Well, we already have a ton of comments, so I'm just going to take a couple seconds and say hi to everyone. And as you guys know, the way that we do our Ask Fred, or in this case, Ask Simon, you guys can ask questions in the feed. We're going to get to as many as we possibly can. We did have some that were submitted early, so we are going to put those ones up and get those ones covered, but we want you guys to be here with us engaging. So let us know if you're watching us live with #live, #replay if you're catching the replay, and we're going to dive in. So Simon, thanks again. Simon is the Chief Marketing Officer of IdeaPros. And I am the Director of Marketing. And we are really pairing up together today to give you guys marketing and crowdfunding, because that's actually some of Simon's background. So thank you, guys. And Simon, do you want to just give people a little, since we have a lot of viewers, actually, I see a couple people popping in from my Women's Entrepreneur Network as well. So thank you guys for coming. Can you tell us a little bit about your background so they can get a full idea of who you are and what you bring to the table?
Oh, sure. My pleasure. So, I got my undergraduate degree in sociology, but I had done a lot of work in mathematics and computer science prior to college, tons. And so I was very nerdy. And so I'm now just a nerd who can write. I like to say I'm a nerdy marketer. And then right after that, I got my master's degree in finance, so I can play with numbers. And so I spent my career doing marketing and business strategy. I spent 10 years at Advanced Micro Devices, where ultimately I ran social media for that company. It's a Fortune 500 company. After that, I wound up working with high-tech companies and startups for the last decade. So my body of case studies is very, very large. So you can argue about whether or not I'm good at what I do, but you cannot argue about whether or not I've done it at this point.
No, we cannot. You're wonderful at it. I mean, and we just covered a few within a partner meeting, and it was really impressive to go through some of the projects that you have worked on. So we already have several questions. So I'm going to hit the ground running. I know you guys all want to try to get your questions in. So one of the main, first questions about crowdfunding would be, when do you start crowdfunding? From Bill, who is the creator of Goliath, and I will at the end I'll show you guys his product too. So when would you start crowdfunding?
Bill, when you have a fantabulous prototype and you know how to fund manufacturing. Those are the two things. So you need a financial plan for funding manufacturing, and that can be inclusive of a crowdfund raise. And as most of you know who may have heard me talk about crowdfunding, you got to see it in multiple pieces when you're crowdfunding. You've got, of course, audience building and pre-marketing and all those things. But then you've got that first phase of crowdfunding, that first raise. And then often you'll go to a second platform. And then after that, you'll start selling direct on your website. And these are all ways in which you can accumulate funds as you lean into manufacturing. And money, it's important to think about money in time. And so where these cash flows hit is super important. And, as IdeaPros partners, it's easy for us to have these kinds of conversations with you about where these things fall. Now, in terms of your prototype, there are three important vectors for a prototype. It can be useful, it can be innovative, and it can be sexy. It has to be at least two of the three. If you have an ugly prototype, but it's useful and innovative, then that's a thing. You can do that. And so I've gone to Kickstarter with a high-tech product that was made out of wood, but it was super innovative and super useful for that audience. So that was the Virtuix Omni Kickstarter that I ran. So, but you have to be at least two. It helps if you're three. If you have a bad-looking prototype for something that isn't very useful, but it's innovative, well, then your audience is probably small. If you've got a prototype that isn't useful, but is super sexy and super innovative, but does something that isn't necessarily practical every day, but it's kind of a luxury item, like a really cool table weight, then that's cool. You can go do that. So yeah, you got to have a good prototype, kind of have a funding plan, and then you've got to do the work to gain an initial audience as a part of that ThreadUp.
Perfect. And you can crowdfund in different stages, right? So as far as your business, you might be funding for different activities.
But in terms of like thinking like what normally people test think is like Kickstarter.
Beginning,
so
right.
Those are the things you need to have before you really can go to Kickstarter. And you also have to vet, those crowdfunding platforms aren't good for everything. They're not good for B2B. They're tough for apps. So you kind of have to very early on vet, is your product going to be well suited to traditional crowdfunding, or do you have to do something a little different?
Wonderful. Great advice. So another question that we have is, what are the best options for apps that aren't storefront for a physical product or standalone? And that one's kind of a tricky question. So I'm not sure if we might need to ask some clarifying questions. Thank you, Adam, for sending it though. And it might be marketing, not crowdfunding. Let me see if you can.
Adam, why don't you clarify your question?
Yeah.
Feel free to re-ask and we'll just come back to it.
Perfect.
So I want to understand it before I answer.
Yeah, perfect. Then we did have another question. Well, actually, he wants to know, let's see. Oh, Bill, I know you're asking if your project is ready. So Simon will take a look at it for sure. And again, it's a great product. We have a nice prototype and good video.
And I'll look at any partner product. If a partner has a product with a question about crowdfunding or anything like that, and you give it to Tessa or to your project manager, they will get it to me and I will answer.
Perfect.
Anybody's question. Okay.
So how safe is crowdfunding if you don't have a patent? Great.
Question. That's a fabulous question.
It is.
There are all sorts of ways businesses take risks, and you have to pick your battles. One of the things I like to say, just generally, is you can break a few rules, but you got to follow most of them. And that's true in marketing, it's true in business. You have to choose which rules you're breaking. And often the rules you break are part of what make you innovative. In the case of IP around a new product, patents don't actually protect well early innovations. It takes many years to get a patent. And so often people are introducing products where they submit the patent and the patent is actually awarded until after the product's in market. So that creates things that are tricky. Patent pending status is useful. The real issue is if you disclose an innovation by starting to market it, but you haven't patented it, someone else could go ahead and patent it or attempt to do so. Someone else could start to use it. And so it does create some risk. Generally, when you're in a startup phase, the most important thing you have is your ability to go fast. But if you have a foundational piece of IP that you think is going to carry you forward for the next decade, yeah, you need to go try to protect that IP, especially if you believe it is indeed an invention. But yeah, it's tricky. I have marketed on Kickstarter products where maybe we could have done a patent. But what happened was we just had to move fast. And so we did, and we didn't file a patent for the first product. But then we got clever ideas for our second and third generation products, which we are patenting. So, sometimes you just need to know if you're going to be successful first before you make those big investments.
Wouldn't that be nice if we all knew if we were going to be successful?
Well, you got to test it, right? So the only way to know is you go test it and you go get in the market. And if you're fabulously successful, then you've got money for future IP. But, I spent a lot of my career early on, the thing where I kind of jumped off from corporate America to startups. I started developing some IP. And in the end, it wasn't useful at all to file a patent, except intellectually for me. The whole project, it was too far out. And a guy at Amazon beat me to it. So Amazon has a patent on the thing I was trying to patent. They beat me by a year.
Oh, but you know what, Fred usually, and you guys check out our patent shows too, Fred will talk about doing a provisional patent, if anything, but that it's dangerous because you may not know all the mechanics of what you're trying, just like what, you may not know how.
In that case, I did a provisional. and still they
They
beat me
beat you
to the,
from
to the-
time
they beat
because
me
the
in
clock
time.
started when
Yeah.
they started it. Yep. So
Now, I could
definitely.
have written it faster. So I do regret not moving faster. So to the point of this question, if you're thinking about doing it and you've got it, you kind of have to do it like fast.
Do it. So I think
Great question.
Great question. Yes. And I have a couple people. I know we have some app people in here. And I think the question that Adam's asking is more along the line of if you have an app instead of a physical product and raising money. And I know that Kristen, you have the same question. And is that something that you can do with crowdfunding?
Here's the thing. Let me explain the problem with physical goods is to get to scale and manufacture a bunch of them, you actually have to put up the money potentially for hundreds or thousands of the widget before you sold any. With software, you don't have that problem. You have to pay for software development, but there's this huge piece of scaling, which isn't a factor when you have an app or software or service versus a physical product, which is why crowdfunding in general is particularly important to physical products. So generally, if I'm doing an app or something like that, what I suggest is the whole lean startup minimum viable product approach, where you don't try to create the version of the app that boils the ocean. You try to create the version of the app that establishes whether or not anybody's interested in that shit. And if they are interested, then you go build and grow and then, ideally raise money or get some cash flow, and you're able to further invest. But at that point, you have some confidence because you've got early traction with that core idea that you thought was the essential selling point.
Perfect. I hope that answers your question. Let us know if it does. Give us a thumbs up in the chat if we've answered your question. I do know that we talk a lot about marketing apps and that process, and we've had a lot of conversations about that recently. And so really, as far as marketing an app, let's just throw a couple marketing tips in there. I know advertising, it's all about the money that you're putting behind it, right? So great video, great optimization on the store. What else can you think of that we need to have for them to market their app?
Well, so we just had a really good seminar on that where they talked about optimization. The key thing with marketing these days, as with anything else, is you have to find your audience, and you've got to find out how you're going to go touch your audience. You got to figure out how are you going to reach those folks. And it helps when audiences are well identified and not super narrow. So you want an audience that's adequately large that you can go find a way to go touch. Either they congregate online, they have Facebook groups, they have LinkedIn groups if it's B2B. But you want to find your audience, and you want to figure out how you're going to go start touching those people, because you're going to want to go sell to those people. And so in the early phases of a startup, it's just as much about selling as it is marketing. And it's just as much about not making money and getting users.
And I had a question that was submitted from Odin. I don't know, Odin, if you want to type it in, you can, and I'll put it up on the screen for you, about building your database. So a lot of what you're talking about here is actually building how you go about building a database and marketing to them. That was Odin's question. And you can do this really early, right? You can start building your audience. You can build your interested base without telling them much about your product. So very, very early on.
Yeah, and one of the things we do with Launchpad is we tell people, once we've got an initial product, we try to tell people about it and see if we can get them to buy, and we can do various kind of social media things, run contests and so forth to build those lists and audiences. So the way you build an audience is, yes, by creating databases of audiences. Now, it turns out that, let's say I go steal an email list. I think that's a good idea.
Which is very common. I'm
going to go try to steal an email list. I'm going to go spam those people. That's not necessarily the right thing to do. It can't be done. It's not necessarily the right thing to do. So instead, what we recommend is find affordable ways to reach audiences by basically leasing them, like you do with Facebook advertising, or even, again, for B2B, LinkedIn advertising, or through influencer marketing. All those things kind of working together all at once. And so the unique combination of those things varies from opportunity to opportunity. But yeah, you do want to build lists. You do want to understand the modes by which you're going to get to audiences. First, you want to identify where they are and who they are and how big they are. And then you want to figure out, can I start talking to those people? Do I need to buy my way into those people? Do I need to advertise my way into those people? And that way you can start building approaches and tactics and then campaigns that kind of cut across those things and budgets that can then be allocated to those various activities.
Well, the budget one is interesting because that a lot of people, they don't think about how much it's going to cost to reach people in their database. And you do have to have some marketing dollars to build your database. You have to have some marketing dollars to put behind the second part of Odin's question which is how do you reach those people once you have the list? How do you keep in touch with them? And I love CRMs. I'm a nerd. You guys already know my tech background is heavy. I love databases. I love automation. I love nurturing through regular touches. Equally, I love retargeting ads, which are to show your ad to your base again. After you've gotten them, then you're showing your ad to them again. So there's all these tactics that you can do once you have your list. And it doesn't have to be a huge list. So, a lot of people think I have to have 700,000 contacts. You can start with the database of 30 and start nurturing them. If you're doing it, you have to start somewhere. You don't usually just dive in and have this giant base of people. So start your spreadsheet, start looking.
And Tessa's like the master at this. So Tessa and I work together beautifully. And, part of, in terms of the skills around marketing, all of the things around building audiences, branding and positioning and developing campaigns and all of those things. Those are all skills that we have on the IdeaPros team to help you get through these things. And again, you see folks like Tessa who do this day in and day out, really masters of it.
Oh, that's sweet of you. Well, thank you. Well, we are definitely, all of our partners have, they're all in different places. So I know we have a lot of them on our chat. And those of you who don't know us, we actually work with entrepreneurs to help get their products or apps to market, but build businesses, not just to get them out there. And so these are little things like, what is your customer service going to look like? Because you're not going to get your testimonials, which support your marketing, if you don't have customer service, right? So the bigger picture of what you're putting together, you just have to think more globally when you're marketing. Make sure that you've got people happy. Then you can really do marketing effectively.
In the chat, people are talking about, spreadsheets are great. Documents are great. As I have said many times, writing things down matters. And Tessa's like, not only do you need to write things down, you need to database knowledge. So someone says, would I use Excel or Google Sheets? Well, I'm all about using these collaborative tools. Mm-hmm, sure. or Google Sheets. So I love using the Google Suite because I'm able to share and collaborate with Tessa and the other members of my team, regardless of where they are. We can bring people into a project anywhere. And when we document things like that, we can very quickly all add knowledge, and that's critical.
And you don't have 15 versions of the same document. Let me tell you, I go crazy when I have to deal with all these different versions of Google Docs or spreadsheets, and then you publish the wrong thing. I mean, it definitely helps to have a remote team using any of the Google G Suite products. I know there's a lot that do it too. So 365, all those do it too. But there are database systems. So if you want to do contact management, that's a different thing than having a spreadsheet, because you can only write so many columns across.
That's
on how many times.
Spreadsheets.
I like to log, okay, hey, I talked to this influencer. We negotiated this amount for this amount of,
But you would agree with me, Tessa. If you start by writing things in Google Sheets, you can always fold it into a real CRM. Absolutely. If you find your scale gets too big.
Yeah, and low tech, if you are challenged by the high tech, if you're challenged by the high tech, you've got to go low tech. I don't, start document, just hand write if you have to, guys, just to get your list down.
Now, why are we talking so much about this? Because if you don't write stuff down, you don't retain knowledge, and you can't share knowledge, and you can't collaborate with team members effectively. You have to write things down. Unfortunately, if you're the kind of person who works verbally and you're good at that, get someone who's good at not working verbally and is really good at writing stuff down, because that's how you can collaborate. Or go build that DNA. Decide, I'm going to become the kind of person who writes things down and reads books. And it's a really good skill set for someone who's serious about organizing and managing the complexity of a real business. Let's keep going. Let's talk about
I have another question from Shelly, actually. When do you finally share a rendering of your product for marketing purposes before the crowdfunding stage?
I never share a rendering of my product.
Before it?
No, what you have to do is you need to share the reality of it. And so it turns out in crowdfunding, for years, Kickstarter would let people use renderings of their product. And then people started using renderings and the shit didn't exist. And so it really created the wrong kinds of mentalities for founders who thought, well, I can go take a product to market when I don't have a prototype. Prototyping is so important. And so they stopped allowing it. And now you can get away with a little bit, but why share a rendering when you can share a prototype? And if you're sharing a rendering, you're giving your competitors a really early start. So don't do that.
Don't do it. Don't tell them ahead of time.
No, unless there's some super important, unless you're doing it for some super important reason.
Right. And if you're sharing, I know this is a big question that people have, is what if I'm sharing with my graphic team? What if I'm sharing with this, the people who are helping you to get the materials together? I mean, clearly you have to, or you're not going to be able to.
You got to share, and and it's hard to know whom to trust.
Right.
But it's important to have people you can trust.
Yes. So we definitely, we talk about this. We have non-disclosures. I mean, even if you're sharing your idea on the IdeaPros website, there's a non-disclosure right there for you.
Yep.
We understand confidentiality, and anyone who is good at what they do in their industry understands confidentiality like that. So definitely be careful though. Don't just, go give it to everybody. Don't put it out on social media necessarily. Be cautious. So great question from Odin. I don't know if this might be a scope one where it's big, but what's a full scope of crowdfunding? How much money should you budget? And how much time should I commit to the project? That's a whole episode in one right there, Odin. It's a great question.
You should watch let's paste in the Facebook Live that we did on crowdfunding, because that was so good. I was on that day. I wasn't up working till 3:30 a.m. like I was last night. Obviously. No, it's great. Work is rewarding. But the one thing I'll say to your question is this: expect it to own you. Even for simple projects, it requires a lot of time and energy. So don't think about budgets. When you're in the entrepreneur space, the budget on your time has no limit. I'm sorry, that's the reality of it. Go look at how Fred Carey works. It's, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, it's a pain in the ass, but it's in a confined period of time. And as I like to say, any amount of pain which does not kill you is tolerable for a finite period of time. Mm-hmm. And the thing about planning and positive execution is you minimize the time frame of feeling that pain and having that unbounded time. So you really got to be devoted. Now, in terms of like your specific project, we just go through, actually, I have a scoping spreadsheet that I can sit down with partners and go through for crowdfunding campaigns if we think they're a good candidate. And then we can, not if we think it is, but like if it makes sense to talk about that as a part of the marketing or go-to-market approach, we can go talk about crowdfunding. We can talk about scoping your project, and we've got tools we use to go do that.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, and it's in the episode for the full version, but there are certain things that are lend well to crowdfunding. So there's certain items, right? And what's your kind of rule of thumb for crowdfunding good opportunities?
Which one?
So the good items to go to crowdfunding,
just the simple thing is stuff where there's already an audience for that stuff on a crowdfunding platform, because at this point everything's been tried once. So go find the audience, and if you've got something that like kind of is a tweener, like it's kind of like that, then you got to think about it and go talk to someone like me or maybe someone else who's been a part of these projects and can help you assess if there is a reachable audience. Things where I'll give some concrete examples. Hunting, really hard on Kickstarter.
Smaller audience, like they're very
small audience, picky people, very conservative, not used to e-commerce. What's easy? Board games, like the center of the board gaming universe is Kickstarter. Oh. Literally, it's how new board games get launched. You do Kickstarters, and so there's everything in between hunting and board games. Right?
That's a pretty broad spectrum.
Yeah, but everything is there. Everything is there. Don't try to do some sort of a service on Kickstarters. Tend not to do well. tricky. If you're trying to start a local business in a big city that does something really cool and awesome and community-based, yeah, you can go do that. But generally, it helps if things are more kind of national, global in nature. If you're writing your first novel and you've never done anything like that before, a little tricky to do on Kickstarter.
That makes sense.
Little tricky.
So I think that we have a couple more questions, and I know we're running out of time. So I appreciate you so much staying on, Simon. If you ask questions and we haven't answered them yet, then we will go back through the chat and get answers for you guys. So don't worry. So as far as determining, well, let's see, I just lost it now. Can crowdfunding determine the scale of a product or app? Good question, Phil. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so if you have a real good crowdfunding campaign, can it help lead to future success? You bet it can. However, I will say this. If a product has a destiny to be successful, then building a good crowdfunding campaign is just one kind of an early edge of that marketing swing of the bat. And usually all you do is you play on the advantages of that product that are going to make it successful anyway. Crowdfunding is basically squeezing a lot of marketing goodness and a marketing campaign into a short period of time, where you're really asking people to come give you money for it. And if you've got a super compelling product, where people are actually willing to give you money for something before you're able to deliver it, then that certainly does speak volumes about the goodness of the thing in the first place. And crowdfunding can be a vehicle for helping you get to that next level: initial production, increased visibility. And then once you have initial production, if people start liking it and using it and doing YouTube videos about it, all this magical thing, that is all really begun. In large measure, those fires are lit by that initial campaign. I mean, I have launched companies on Kickstarter. It works.
It does. Yes. And there's other alternatives to Kickstarter. But we don't have to go into those yet. I actually have one question, and then we're going to let you go. One more marketing question. And it's,
oh, by the way, I really could use a high-rise sports chair. So I'm ready.
You're ready. Well,
I'm ready. I'm a chair buff. And I'm 6'5", so yeah, I'll take a high rise.
A little extra height above everyone else.
That's right. There. As you can see, I'm so tall that I'm above my camera's left or right.
Right. We need to get him one of those, Bill. So Christine asks, for a truck accessory, how do you find groups and build connections without discussing your project? I love this one personally.
The thing is, lots of people have trucks in America, and so the great news is maybe you don't have to. If you go figure out how to make your widget and you make your great widget for a truck, then once you launch it, there are lots of people with trucks. I got a big Tahoe, right? Big trucks are a thing. Lots of people have them. If you've got something great for big trucks, once you launch it, it can be reasonably successful in market. Again, it's one of those neat things where trucks have widespread enough adoption that you can do marketing and it will reach the right people. It's products that are kind of in between, where it's too diffuse and too few people want to actually buy it.
Right. This one, I think that you can connect with audiences ahead of time. So you can look for anywhere where people are, truck
forums. F-150 forums. There's like a whole forum for Ford truck owners. There's a whole forum for Chevy truck owners.
Yes. And they are always on there, not just social media. We're not just talking social media here. They're literally just, what are they, like a forum, a discussion forum on the internet for these truck owners where they're posting their pictures. So there's tons of places. Go just find the links to these resources. If you have to follow or join them, do that if it's in social media, and just be there. Don't even worry about publishing anything that you're doing. Just be there. And then I call it C method. So S is study. Look at what they're doing in those groups and what kinds of things are getting a lot of attention. So study, engage, comment, share their stuff, nothing of yours yet. And then you can get into educate. And that would be as you're starting to release, then you're starting to put out valuable information that might lead to your product eventually. So it's kind of a process, but don't just jump in and start connecting with people. I mean, give it time, really study what is working and what's getting attention. And that helps a lot. But document those groups in a spreadsheet so you can come back to them when you're ready to market. You have your whole plan of who you're going to reach out to and where you're going to post. If you are a partner and you don't have the worksheet from me yet and instructions, let me know, because I have a whole worksheet with this stuff.
I want to cherry pick a question. Someone asked about, does Kickstarter work for makeup brands? Well, the good news is IdeaPros has experience working with growing makeup brands. We also have very good databases for those that we can go reach out and touch. We have lots of email addresses. So the answer is, yeah, it can. It does help if you've done something previously, but we've got some legs up that can accelerate your audience building and outreach. Absolutely. We're good on cosmetics.
Yeah, Sherry's a partner of ours, so she's
we're good with that. And Launchpad is a great place for you, and we've already got pre-built audiences around cosmetics.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Simon. I know we're running a little late. Thank you guys all so much for submitting your questions. And we are here every Friday at noon Pacific time, and we're bringing some variety in. We gave Fred a day off, but we miss you, Fred. We will see you next week at noon on Friday. And if you haven't followed or subscribed to our channel, hit that now so that you guys can get notifications when we are live. We'll see you guys all next week. Thank you. Bye.